Good afternoon, everybody. The Blue Cliff Record, case 70. Mouth shut. Introduction. A quick person only needs a single word. A swift horse only needs one stroke of the crop. 10,000 years are one moment. One moment is 10,000 years. If you want to become acquainted with direct perception, it is before mention is made. But tell me, before any mention is made, how can you search for it? The main case. Isan, Goho, and Ungan were all standing by their master Hakujo. Hakujo then asked Isan, "How would you speak with your mouth shut?" Isan said, "I would ask you to speak instead, teacher." Hakujo then said, "It's not that I refuse to tell you, but I'm afraid that afterward I would be bereft of any descendants." The verse. He asked the teacher to speak instead. Sprouting horns, the tiger emerges from the wild weeds. On all the 10 continents, flowers fade and fall when the springtime ends. Yet over the vast coral forest, the sun is dazzling bright. Now, this is the first in a series of 3 koan, case 71, 2, and 3 in the Blue Cliff, where one by one the master takes each of his disciples and gives them this same challenge. Here we take up the first. And I'd like to bring some attention to the introductory comments. A quick person only needs a single word. I think Sensei gave some talk yesterday about horses and encouragements. The swift horse only needs one stroke. Now, this is an analogy that occurs in many places in the training. You have to remember that back in the day, a horse is an important function of daily life. Like a car today. It was something known to everybody. And of course, you had to take a horse and they needed training. There was a time, lifetimes ago, and yet not that long ago, when out at the farm, Doan was breeding Irish draft horses. Did you know that? Yeah. She's really into it and quite good at it. And then the business of training the horse, that's like a real thing. I have only glancing and financial encounter with such matters, no direct experience, but I can say that it's a real business. I mean, that horse, they're big. Have you ever been actually next to such a creature? I mean, they're massive. This is no pug. This is much bigger than a pug. And they are strong. Ooh. I mean, just put your hand on a horse carefully and in the right place, please. But there's a lot of power there, much gentleness also, but also there's a temperament. And, it's not, all horses are not the same. It's kind of like you're riding your car, but then the car has its own ideas. Decides it wants to pull over here and smell the grass for a while, I don't know, maybe our AI cars will get us there again. The analogies will all be about to correctly program the algorithm, only a single glance from the programmer is needed. I don't know. But why these analogies? Well, because actually, your practice of Zen is kind of very much like that. sitting there on the cushion, you might look for all the world like a peaceful Buddha, at ease and repose, with clear light, luminous, oozing from your every pore. And yet, perhaps inside, the wild horse might be dragging you around a bit, huh? And, we get, some of us anyway, better than others, but we generally get pretty good at containing or masking or corralling that when in polite company, or when it matters to us. We find a way to function more or less harmoniously, or we suffer consequences. To sort of go along to get along. And what's interesting is we perhaps bring that mind and that model into Zen training, and we think, oh, here's a place to get along, so I will go along. But eventually, hopefully fairly soon, that model absolutely fails you. There's no way, if you're really training, to put up a front, to put up a mask, to bring your armor and put a dress on it, and think that it's not going to be noticed. It will be, and thank goodness. That's actually exactly what you long for and what you need. So this thing about the horse is kind of half of it. The other half of it is that the person who's wielding that riding crop, they need to know what the hell they're doing. That's also true. It's not just the horse that has to have it together. It's the trainer. I mean, a really good horse with a fine temperament and an able body under the hands of an idiot trainer. Not so good. This is where I have to bow very much to my teacher. It's very easy to get to a point and to kind of coast. And the true masters don't do that, ever. I had the very clear sense that every time I came before my teacher, it was as though it was the first time we had ever met. And also, we were ancient, old, dear friends, kind of at the same time. There's an aliveness to the encounter, and sometimes, frankly, I was not up to the challenge, but I would try. But my teacher had this way of always really being right there. And go in, settle down, bring the catastrophe along with me, or try to stuff it under my sleeve, or whatever. Their eyes open, and suddenly, painfully and somewhat joyfully obvious, no mask would avail me here. So what now? Perhaps the plan that I walked in with was suddenly just not gonna actually help. And thank goodness. Especially if you're smart about it, if you're kind of good at putting on the camouflage and you wear that mask real well. Because most people don't really care about you enough to frankly deal with it. They're not there for that either. Let's all just get the job done and go home, shall we? But Sangha is not like this. Sangha, in the truest sense, is a community of training and practice. So if you come into Zen training expecting every single person and situation to be laden with patchouli oil and flowers, you'll be disappointed. It should be hard. Life is hard. Until it's not anymore. Bodhidharma famously said, Zen is a special transmission outside the scriptures, with no reliance on words or letters, a direct pointing to the human mind and the realization of Buddhahood. That is as concise and close to an answer as can be given, using words. A special transmission outside the scriptures. Even the word transmission is a little perilous, but we'll go with it. But it's an intimate, direct knowing that will not be availed by quoting chapter and verse, no matter how well written or how correct the words happen to be. Spouting back the words won't do it. They're not yours. What does your heart say? What does your Dharma eye see? With no realization on words and letters. Our guidance goes on to say, 10,000 years are one moment. One moment is 10,000 years. I've had the occasion to speak about this with several of you in Doksan, the session, that timeless time. Sometimes people, as we start to develop and get some traction with this thing, there can be this overwhelming sense that I need to be here more, I need to do this more. And I'm not going to say you're wrong. But notice that every time you're here, it's as though you have never left. There's really only one session. It's something like this. And whether you're at session again next month or it takes you 10 years, I promise you, when you come back to that session, it'll feel exactly now. And it's always like that. Did my first session in 1987. And I'm still doing that one session for the first time. If you want to become acquainted with direct perception, what is this direct perception? Bodhidharma says, a direct pointing to the human mind, with no realization on words and letters, a direct pointing to the human mind. The koan says, if you want to become acquainted with direct perception, it is before mention is made. It's before the words and the ideas and the stories. And look, I like some words and ideas and stories. I'm fond of language. It's delicious. And yet, don't be fooled. The pathway to intimacy is not through the words. It's direct perception. Before mention is made. Before the story is told. But tell me, before mention is made, how can you search for it? So we come into retreat, and most of us come bearing many gifts. The tragedies, the dramas, which are real, the grief, which I also feel. Also the elations and the triumphs, the adventurous wonder, or the mundane kind of numbness, whatever it is. And whatever you bring, it's funny business, but you sit there on the cushion, and can you tell that you're sitting there still chewing on your own language? That the mind is still clinging to its obsessive perception of this and that, yes and no, up and down, I've been righted, I've been wronged? Or does it just keep coasting without your awareness? You see, a mind that is mired in its own discrimination leaves traces. And more like gouges. Moving through the space, you leave scrapes in the air itself. Only you can't see it. But they can be felt. You can easily imagine yourself, or myself, or any of us for that matter, walking in kin-hin with the Rubik's Cube sitting there clicking away, trying to figure out how it's going to do this thing and how it's going to do that thing. Oh, and this other puzzle's over here spinning, right? And all these puzzles are playing out in your mind. Do you think that has no effect beyond the insides of your own skull? Perhaps this may horrify you, but the fact is that that whole thing is radiating out. It's radiating out all the time. It always has been. If that doesn't give one pause, not much will, or you don't understand it. And that's why when you're in the presence of a real teacher, and I mean a real deal teacher, there's a tracelessness. It's not that my teacher has no personality or no quirks or foibles, believe me, fully Homo sapien through and through, but there's a tracelessness there. When I would go before my teacher and make my bows, find my seat and my place in the room, and their eyes open to meet mine, there's a tracelessness, a purity, if you will, a directness. It doesn't require violins. It doesn't require sonatas. It's just clean. It's clear. There's no trace. Pure momentness. And it doesn't come from nowhere. Well, it comes from experience. It comes with a lot of experience. Finding that purity, that luminous mind in stillness. Stillness. And I don't mean just body stillness, which is its own thing. Learning how to get your body to be still in a way that your body can is the first step. But getting your mind to actually settle. Now, importantly, if you start trying to smack the puzzles away, you're agitating. It's like trying to calm the ripples in the pool by throwing rocks at the waves. It just makes more. So the guidance is very, very simple. Be still, pay attention. There's a footnote saying, shut up. Inner and outer shutting up. Now that doesn't mean that you don't hear the wind pushing on the building, and you don't hear the heater doing its work, that you don't hear the bells and see the Sangha members coming and going and so on. All that perception is happening. There's just no clinging to it, and there's no story making. The Doksan bell rings. How come they get to go in and I don't? Why? That Doksan Jisha is ignoring me, behaving. No, it's not the Jisha, it's the Roshi. Roshi doesn't want to see me. What did I do? Oh my God, you know what? I remember the other day, I went in and he didn't make eye contact with me. He hates me. Ring! Oh, the bell rang quick. Ha! They failed their koan. At least they didn't get past their koan. Excellent. They're not ahead of me. There's no way they passed a koan that quick. That's clearly a no. Yes. And you don't know that whole story. It's just, can you relate? It's not volitional. Hear me, I'm not saying that you're trying to do that. I'm not saying like you decide, I will now critique the scene. You know, it's not like that. It's what your mind is conditioned to do, God help you. Huh? It's what you're deeply practiced at that. Itzhak Perlman on the violin, he's got nothing on you. You have practiced this since you were an infant almost, damn near. You're a virtuoso at storytelling. Only you never, consented to this. But it turns out that this story-making machine, not only is it beautiful, it's also terrifying. When you actually see the workings of your own mind. Actually, when you really see it, it's quite funny. One of the most common responses to a deep encounter is it's a good, solid belly laugh. And it's at the whole thing. I wish that laugh for you. I can remember sometimes I would be in that Dosan room and I'm dying. I'm just dying. It's not happening. It's not working. I can feel it. They can feel it. That bell's going to ring any second. And the most hilarious belly laugh would erupt from Roshi. And I didn't know how to perceive it because my story mind was insulted or offended or slighted or this is an affront to my dignity and worth of all beings. What the hell is this? You know, you're supposed to care after all. But you know what my deeper self did? I laughed right along with him. I couldn't help myself. I didn't even know what the fuck was funny. Had nothing to do with it. Nothing to do with it. Nothing to do with it. It's just this pure mind meeting mind, you see. And of course the bell rings. But somehow it's as though the teeth were brushed at an angle I can never reach myself somehow. Some kind of mental flossing had occurred, some kind of shaking up of the assumptions about what things meant and how I had to protect my me-ness or whatever. And of course, as you come back to the Zendo and sit, you know, your karmic habit energy patterns will perhaps reassert themselves and descend, but now you can smell them. No. This is not acceptable. And some gap begins. Some wordless, spaceless gap between Storyville and what you decide now to truck with, to give your energy to. Very gradually, and sometimes kind of suddenly, you find yourself more and more empowered. More and more noble, actually. More and more capable to actually just be yourself. And it doesn't mean that because you meditate well or come and make a devotion to Kuan Yin or something that suddenly all the ducks line up and march in order. Your life is still a mess. Your life is still beautiful in the same way and in the same moment. And yet, the one who's in it is different. How it's perceived, very different. The Lankavatara Sutra is one of the most important sutras in the Zen lineage. It's said to be the sutra that Bodhidharma himself brought up from India when he went into China. A little bit of it might be helpful at this point. It is for the sake of the ignorant who are addicted to the discrimination of the multiplicity of things which are their own mind that it is said by me that discrimination takes its rise owing to attachment to the aspect of multiplicity. Which seems to be characteristic of objects. There's a hoodie, there's a gray robe, there's a black robe, there's a, whatever that is, rock suit, a brocade rock suit. There's a wine-colored cushion, there's a black cushion, there's a whatever color that is cushion, there's a chair, there's a bench, there's a window. Multiplicity of objects. That's carpet, that's hardwood. Discrimination takes its rise from the mind becoming attached to the multiplicities of things, which in and of themselves are not real. And emancipation comes from thoroughly understanding the meaning of reality as it truly is. People grasping their own shadows of discrimination become attached to this thing and to that thing. In failing to abandon dualism, they go on forever discriminating and thus never attain tranquility, never attain tracelessness. Because still, after all, you're offended. After all, you're hurt. After all, you won. You did it right. You're victorious and triumphant before all. It doesn't matter which way the narrative goes. It's still a narrative. What is it that's free of the words and the ideas and the narrations? How is it possible to learn to actually use language as opposed to be used by it? Because again, I'm reading a bunch of words. I've said several. You come into Doksan, quite often there's language involved. What's going on? There are books of koan, you know. Many books. See, the mind clings to this idea of self, of mind. And we emotionally behave as though we were permanent. You do. You do. You emotionally react as though you were actually a permanent, singular, independent, fixed entity. Oh, memo, you're not. It's shocking. I mean, an easy example. You look in the mirror and go, when the hell did all this gray happen? That's an easy example. Or we look around the world and we expect also to be singular, fixed, permanent, reliable. Guess what? It's not. It never has been. That's a story, dear one. There are better stories. I opened the session by saying, drive everything into one. To train the horse of your mind to go from being a wild kicker to being a beautiful, noble steed. You must get the horse to stop frisking around at everything that jumps or rattles or moves. You must get your own mind to be able to drive everything into just this one thing. Typically, breath is where we start. Horror. Like really, no kidding, really. All the concerns, all the traumas, all the woes, everything, make the long list, bigger than this voluminous sleeve, long list. Your concerns, your aspirations, your griefs, your triumphs, all of it. Drive all of that shit right into one. And I mean it. Drive everything into one. If you can intimately and precisely, with great kindness, take care of this one inhale, you're taking care of all of it. Not just your own trauma, the trauma of the world. But then what you have to do immediately is let that go. You cannot simply be the inhale-only school of Zen. We only inhale. We don't like the exhales. But that's what you fucking do. Mine. I want this. I'm going to be like that, and I'm going to be like this, and I'm going to have this thing, I'm going to have this thing, and all my stuff. Look, you're going to have to exhale at some point. It feels good for a second, but then it's like, wait, I need to breathe in again. It's funny, but it is what we do. Well, I'm not going to inhale again because I just had to let go anyway. Fuck it. What are you doing? What are you doing? That makes sense. How's that working for you? Well, fine. And not so fine, I think. Really, if you get intimate with your own body's most basic, one of the most basic functions in a goodly amount, not too much, not too little, no fanfare, no drama, no tragedy, just keep fucking breathing. And really be there for it. And then, okay, hold it for just an amount. How long exactly? I don't know. Just get on with it. Breathe in. Your body knows how to do this. Exhale. Let it go. And then let it come back in. You see? There's so much wisdom in here. There's more wisdom in you connecting with what's going on there than anything anybody could ever say from any high seat. Because if you see this, you actually are seeing it in your own body. And that is durable. When you leave the cloistered grounds of the temple and your karmic world begins to unfold around you again, your breath is right there with you, man. Right there. There is no ally stronger or more ever present. But I could write poetry about my breath. I could compose symphonies about my breath. I could create masterworks. I could do interpretive dance. You may well, and I think that's fantastic. But don't confuse. Do not confuse the essential matter. Let's just put the toys down for now and pay attention to the most important thing. Quick person only needs a single word. A swift horse only needs one stroke of the crop. 10,000 years are one moment. One moment is 10,000 years. If you want to become acquainted with direct perception, this direct pointing to the human mind, your mind, it is before mention is made. But tell me, before any mention is made, how can you search for it? Isan, Goho, Ungon were all standing by Master Hakujo. Hakujo then attacked. And he asked Isan, how would you speak with your mouth shut? Say something without moving your teeth or your lips or your tongue. Isan said, well, I'd ask you to speak instead, teacher. Does that do it? Is that an invasion? Is it brilliant? Is it clueless? Does it meet the moment? Is it a worthy response to the moment? Or are there traces? You see, this business of a worthy approach, of a worthy response, are there traces or not? You've heard the phrase, leave no traces. It doesn't mean just wipe up when you're done. It means leave no traces. Does this leave a trace? Well, we can see the master's response, at least. He said, Hakujo said, it's not that I refuse to tell you, but I'm afraid that afterward I'd be bereft of descendants. Hakujo had it together here. Because you see, the best that any teacher can do is point you to yourself. The only use of any talk, or any teisho, or any sutra, or anything else, the only use it can possibly have is to inspire confidence in you, that there's something worth doing and that you can do it. But there the guidance ends. The sage must stand aside, for you are the hero. You have to actually face your life. Nobody can do that for you, not the wisest advisor. And the good advisors don't get you addicted to their advising. Huh? I remember in my own training, there was a certain point in my practice where my teachers seemed to be really engaging with me and connecting with me, and we were building rapport, and we were exchanging biography, and it was all connecting. It felt like many other relationships that matter. But that changed. At some point, we were in a very different kind of terrain, where suddenly my teacher was no longer really that interested in those things. Something else had come into the room. And that other thing was where my teacher's attention kept going, and I couldn't tell what the hell it was. But it sure as hell wasn't about my story, which is what I was used to presenting to myself and to everyone around me. And I was good at it. I'm a good, dutiful boy. I always do what I'm told. I brush my teeth twice a day. He was not impressed. But you know what? If I went in with the story of I'm the idiot, I'm the fool, I can do nothing right, no one loves me, and they're right not to, he wouldn't be impressed with that either. Why? Because he's pointing to something beyond, before, let us say, that story. What is the real truth of you? He asks the teacher to speak instead, but sprouting horns the tiger emerges from the wild weeds. Like a tiger is ferocious enough, but now it sprouts dragon horns on top. That's what it's saying. Of course, India, tigers are a real thing. You're for a walk in the park and then your lunch. Can you imagine being literally chewed to death? That was on the table. Okay, tigers were serious. Leaping from the weeds, a tiger, like to the ears of the people hearing this and speaking it, that was a serious thing to say. It wasn't just like we don't typically run into tigers most days, right? But that's not enough. As if that isn't terrifying enough, there's dragon horns on it now too. Why not spit fire while we're at it? Is that Hakujo? Or is that Isan? Don't confuse the two. On the 10 continents, the whole world, the whole cosmos, flowers fade. Flowers fade and fall when springtime ends. Centuries later, Dogen would use this as part of his teaching in Genjo Koan. Flowers fall with our aversion. A beautiful, wonderful blossom fades, dies. The beautiful blossom falls. My dad's friend is now interred at the cemetery in Parisburg. It's not a joke. In all the cosmos, flowers fade and they fall when their season is over. And yet, at the same time, over the coral forest, the sun is dazzling and bright. These words are skillfully pointing you to something beyond words. Zen is a special transmission, I would say, an experience of intimacy outside the scriptures. You won't be able to read enough about to ever have it be the experience. With no reliance on words and letters, not afraid of them either, but not depending on them. A direct pointing to the human mind, a direct pointing to your heart, and the realization of Buddhahood, making real your true self, awakening to what it is and living out of it. No teacher, no matter how skilled, can do this for you. No teacher, no matter how skilled, can do it for me. And yet, it has to be done. So, for the sake of all beings throughout space and time, take it up, practice deeply, realize yourself, and let this traceless enlightenment continue ceaselessly for the benefit of all beings throughout space and time. May it be so. There's a story.
Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to